I was born Leslie Jacob Wagner. Hated the name Leslie, so when I turned 18, I changed it to Jacob Wagner. So for the last 7 years, I have lived under this name. I was married to Laura for almost 3 years. Her full name was Laura Elizabeth Keyes, and she might have been the twin of a famous princess. I graduated from college and worked for a cement company. The company bought new computer equipment, and we began classes on how to master it. 8 of us sat in the room we had converted into a temporary classroom, waiting for our instructor. She came in and introduced herself as Laura Keyes, and I instantly fell in love. I later learned that 3 of my classmates were also fascinated by her. I was the first one to approach her during a break and invite her to lunch. She refused me, like everyone else who invited her. During the 3 days that she spent with us, Laura rejected all invitations. On the last day of class, we were all given her business cards. She said that we could call if we had any questions or problems about the material covered. This was on Wednesday. I waited until the following Monday before I called her. "This is Laura. I'm unavailable right now, but leave your name, number, and a short message, and I'll call you back as soon as possible." "Hi, Laura. This is Jacob Wagner from the cement company you trained last week. What problem do I need to come up with to get you to agree to go on a date with me?" That was the message I left. She called the next day. "Jacob Wagner, how can I help you?" I answered when my phone rang. "Hi, Jacob. This is Laura. You said you had a problem." "Oh, hi, Laura. Yes, I have a problem. I'm hungry and I hate eating alone." She laughed, and it was a beautiful, ringing laugh. "I can't go to lunch, but I have evenings free," she said. That's how it all started. We ate dinner together for the rest of the week, including Sunday, and continued this way for 5 full weeks after that. We never went to lunch because she trained every day from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. She was either running, swimming, or cycling. Her goal was to compete in the Ironman competition. The Ironman competition consisted of a 2.4-mile swim, followed immediately by a 112-mile bike ride, and then a full marathon of 26.2 miles. All this had to be done in less than 17 hours. She was also vegan, so our meals mostly consisted of quinoa, kale, tofu, brown rice, oats, sweet potatoes, and beans. It took me a long time to get used to eating this way. The first time we made love was at her house. She didn't have a living room as such. It was more like a gym, and the only places to sit were large rubber balls or weight-lifting benches. Her bed wasn't much more comfortable because it was hard as a rock. Making love to her was a unique experience. It was the best sex of my life, and every time he only got better. We had sex every chance we got after that. We got married 14 months after we first met. She stopped training during the honeymoon, but immediately returned to training after we returned. One evening, she came home and I was sitting in the only chair in our living room. She said there is an Ironman competition in Wisconsin next year that she wants to compete in. This would be her first competition at this level, and she would have to train even harder than before, but she was confident that she would be ready when it came. I couldn't imagine anyone training any harder than she already was, and I didn't understand the obsession with something like a competitive sport. Apparently, all people strive to do something outstanding. I loved my job and was also driven, although to a lesser extent than Laura, by the desire to be successful. I was hesitant to agree with her intention because I saw her training just for the sake of training. Training for an Ironman would double her training time. It was then that changes began to occur in our home. Training costs have almost doubled. About 4 months after starting intensive training, she told me that she needed a coach. Her gym had a trainer who had competed in Ironman himself, and he was available and qualified to train her. Of course, it wasn't free. His experience cost us a lot of money. The first thing he did was convince her to quit her job so she could train full-time. She did this without consulting me. Her dismissal immediately brought our family budget to a standstill. She had a very nice sports bike, but her trainer said it wasn't enough, so we bought another one. Then I needed a competition bike. She will use others for training. Then he decided she needed a spare bike for racing, so we bought another one. She ended up with 4 bikes. Their total cost was equal to the cost of my 2-year-old truck. Time passed, and I thought it was time to meet her trainer, so I went to the gym. I knew his name was Jason Hendricks because I wrote him checks every week. I saw them in the weight room. He stood over her while she lifted the barbell. I watched for a couple more minutes before they moved on to another exercise. I don't know the name of it, or even if it has a name, but it involved pulling ropes from the wall. Weights were attached to ropes and weight could be added or subtracted as needed. Laura stood with her back to the wall and held the handles of the rope pulls. Hendricks was facing her and very close. I saw her pull twice before I approached them. She pulled, her arms stretched out in front of her, holding the weights suspended. He stood between her outstretched arms, ran his hands along the outside of her arms, then under them, cupped her chest, and literally placed his hands on her chest as he continued to talk to her. Finally, he removed his hands, and she let go of the ropes. "Why are you touching my wife's breasts?" I asked him, scaring them both to death. Jacob, what are you doing here?" Laura asked. "I thought it was time to meet Mr. Hendricks," I replied. He extended his hand to shake it, but I just looked at him and ignored his gesture. He was 3 inches taller than me and weighed 30 pounds more, all of it in muscle. "You have no right to touch her like that. Then I won't be able to train her properly." "You have to touch her breasts to train them. What kind of training is this?" "This is my method." "Then we will find someone who will train her without these touches. Your services are no longer required. Laura, I'm waiting for you at home." I turned and walked away. "Jacob, Jacob, come back here," she almost shouted after me. I continued walking, got into my car, and drove home. She burst into the house right after me. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she asked. "You can't fire him for doing his job." "I really can't. He played with your breasts, and you just smiled." "He wasn't playing with my breasts. He was assessing my muscle mass." I laughed out loud. "Oh my God, Laura, you can't believe this. He was just playing with your breasts. Assessing your muscle mass, you say, and you stood there and let him do it, even smiling when he squeezed them." "He's not fired. I need him." "Are you serious?" "Oh yes, I'm serious. He's staying." I looked at her. "Then you can keep him, but I don't want to put up with that. I won't pay him another cent, and if you insist on him staying, I won't pay for any of your other training." She looked at me with hatred. "Then I'll find a job, but he remains my coach." I thought for a while before speaking. "How important is he to you?" "Very important." "How important am I to you?" "You are my husband." "But how important am I? I told you I don't want you to train with him, but you insist on continuing. So where do I rank on your list of priorities?" "Where do I stand on your list of priorities if you won't let me train for what I really want?" "I understand what you want, and I support you. But what I don't understand is that he feels the need to shove his stuff in your face and then play with your breasts, and you allow it. You're my wife, and I won't stand for this. Find another coach because he's done. I want to do well in Wisconsin, and he can help me." She crossed her arms and stood in front of me, looking defiant. "How about we perform well in our marriage? Is this Ironman more important than our marriage?" She looked at me, then turned away, unfolded her arms, and wanted to say something, but changed her mind and went upstairs. I realized that this was a fairly clear answer. I sat for several minutes in complete confusion. If I'm not mistaken, she made her decision, and it made my decision easy. I went to my computer and looked into the questions I had heard needed to be addressed when dealing with family problems. I decided to do it before she could. That bastard will never get another dime of my money. If she wants to continue paying him for his caresses, she can do so from her share and while unmarried. We had a fifth-wheel trailer that I used during the summers when I was in college. Laura and I took it to the mountains so she could bike and run on the slopes. She said it was better training than on the plains. I went upstairs and she was in the bathroom. I heard her talking to someone, but all I could hear was, "See you tomorrow." I gathered some clothes and headed to the trailer. 3 more trips, and I took everything I wanted. On the second trip, I heard the bathtub running, so I knew she would be there for at least an hour. She loved to lie in the bath for a long time, especially after a hard day. Once most of my stuff was in the trailer, I loaded up my computer and other personal items. I spent the night in the parking lot of our office. The next day, I informed my boss about the situation. He asked what my plans were, and I replied that I didn't have any yet. That evening, I stopped by home to pick up what else I could need to be. Laura was at home eating kale salad. I went to the room we used as an office and started looking through files and books. She came in and watched me. "Where did you go last night?" she asked. This was the first night we spent apart since our wedding. "I spent the night at the factory." "What about you? Brought Hendrix so he could evaluate your muscle mass again?" "It wasn't necessary." "But would it be true?" "No." There was a long silence as she watched me put away what I was about to take. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm leaving." "Why?" "Because yesterday you made it clear that he is more important to you than me. I told you I want to do well in Wisconsin, and I can't do it without his help." "Are you saying that no other coach can do what he does?" "We work well as a team." "I saw how well you two work as a team. He caresses your breasts and you smile." "I told you he didn't fondle me." I just shook my head. "You and I were once a good team too." "We can still be. Just give me this chance." "Will you give him up as a coach?" She shook her head. "No." "Then I'll leave." I took some of my things and headed towards the door. "When will you be back?" I turned to look at her. "It's up to you. Tell me he's finished, and I'll stay. But if he stays, I'm leaving. Forever. I'm not coming back." She didn't hesitate. "He's staying." Like this. One of us was quite selfish, or maybe both. I wanted a wife, and she wanted to compete. It took me 3 trips to load the remaining items into my truck. She watched me all 3 times. The third time she asked where I was going. "No idea." "When will you be back?" She had asked this question once before, and I thought we had discussed it in sufficient detail. "We've already discussed this. I don't plan on going back." "Jacob, you can't do this just because of my coach. And you can't choose a coach over me, but it looks like you do. I took half our money and charged you off our credit cards. Your phone should have been turned off." I looked at my watch. "About half an hour ago. Utility bills are due next week, as is renter's insurance. Your car insurance is good for another 4 months. I recommend getting a job soon, otherwise you'll be in serious financial trouble." I put my last load of stuff in the truck, then walked through the garage. Her competition bike and spare bike sat there. They were in their own shipping containers, which cost almost as much as the bikes themselves. I picked them up one at a time and literally threw them into my truck. She saw this and ran up. "What are you doing? You can't take them away," she literally screamed. "I sure as hell can't. I paid for them." I got into the truck and drove away. She didn't really care that I was leaving, but she couldn't bear the thought of losing the bikes. The next day, in the morning, she was supposed to be at the gym, so I drove by to check if she was there. I looked inside and saw her and Hendrix sitting on a weights bench. She cried, and he held her hands. I didn't know if she was crying because our marriage seemed to be over or because I had taken her best bikes. I took the next day off to find a spot for my caravan. I paid a month in advance and connected to their communications. Another day later, I talked to my parents and told them everything. "Are you okay?" asked my mother. "Do you need money?" asked my father. I answered yes to the first question and no to the second. Laura and I didn't speak for 2 weeks. Finally, one day she called. I didn't recognize the number, so I didn't answer. She left a message saying she wanted to talk, and I called her back. "Where do we go next?" she asked. "Are you still training with Hendrix?" "Yes, I need him." "Then we're going to court to get a divorce." You can't be serious. Have you slept with him yet? How can you ask such a thing? Easy. Have you slept with him yet? She ended the call. The next day, my boss said there was an opening at our Leadville, Colorado location if I was interested. I agreed and headed to Colorado the next day. About 2 months passed and fall had arrived in Colorado, with winter just around the corner. A small caravan is not the best place to spend the winter, so I rented an apartment and bought cheap second-hand furniture to furnish it. I didn't know what to do with so much space after living in a caravan. My parents and siblings wanted me to come home for Thanksgiving, and I agreed. By then, I had already returned to my normal eating habits. No quinoa, kale, or tofu. It's not that they were bad, I just didn't like them. Spending the holiday with my family was fun. Nobody missed Laura. The day after Thanksgiving, I headed back to Leadville. I had lunch with my parents and was ready to leave town. I was filling up my truck with gas when an old friend saw me. We started talking, and he told me that he saw Laura with some muscular guy. There was a small cafe next to the gas station, and we decided to have a cup of coffee. While sipping coffee, he told me about Laura and Hendrix openly holding hands at the mall and walking down the street. It wasn't uncommon to see them kissing in public. My friend, Zeke, short for Ezekiel, was speaking when his phone rang. It was his brother, and they were discussing plans for the next morning before Zeke's brother Emmanuel had to go to work. I let Zeke know I needed to leave, but he raised his hand, asking me to wait. He said, have you seen Laura Wagner lately? Pause. Yes, Jacob's wife. Pause. Are you kidding? Right now? Okay, thanks. I'm with Jacob. Maybe we'll stop by. Thanks him. What is this about? I asked. You won't believe this, but Laura and her boyfriend are currently checking into M's motel. They've been there for 2 days. I thought you might want to have a little fun before you leave town. He explained what he was up to. They're not there right now. The motel isn't the best, so it doesn't have a restaurant. M thinks they went out for dinner and might be back soon. Probably at the gym, I thought. We quickly went to the motel. Zeke is in his car, I'm in mine. I parked in the farthest corner of the parking lot. I knew him, so he had no problem helping us. By the way, none of our cameras are working, he said. Even the external ones are broken, so you don't have to worry. There will be no recording. He grinned when he said that. Why do you work in a place like this? I asked him. I own this place and make more money a month than the Hampton Inn. Laura and her boyfriend, his name is Jason Hendricks, come here at least one night every week. He's married, so they can't go to his house, and she's been living with her parents since you kicked her out of your house, Jacob and Jason. She obviously likes men with J names. So they've been coming here and hanging out together for 2 days now, because his wife went to visit her family in North Carolina or something for Thanksgiving. I heard them joke about him not going with his wife. They come here because he doesn't dare take her to home. There are too many nosy neighbors. They will check out tomorrow because his wife will return. Give us the key to their room, M. We'll get it back quickly, Zeke told his brother. M handed over the key without hesitation. The motel still used regular keys rather than electronic cards. Zeke and I went to their room. It was obvious that someone had recently had sex there. Okay, Jacob, now it's all up to you. I'll take the photos from the outside and you take the inside. Are you sure won't get into trouble? I asked. He already told you he owns this place. He doesn't allow anything illegal or easy to get girls and still makes a ton of money. If he told you everything he knows about some of the people who spend a few hours here every week, there would be scandals that haven't stopped for years. The police don't even respond to calls in this place. Now come on, do your business, and I'll do mine. Their room was at the back of the motel on the 2nd floor, overlooking the construction site. There was a very small balcony, and I became convinced that the door to the balcony was not only not closed, but also broken so that it could not be locked. I got out, went downstairs, and asked M for a ladder. He told me where his tool shed was and allowed me to use whatever I wanted. Several ladders hung outside the barn. I took a sliding ladder that seemed long enough to reach the second floor and tried it out. She came over, and I went back to my truck and waited. Zeke called me about half an hour later and said they had just gotten back, and he was going to start taking pictures. It was already completely dark. I looked up and waited for the light to come on in their room before I got out of my truck, walked over, and walked up the stairs. They didn't even bother to close the curtains, and I stood on the stairs taking my own photos while they calmly removed their gym clothes and completely undressed. In the rare moments when they looked towards the balcony, I simply hid my head so that they would not notice me. Laura had never had sex without taking a shower, so they headed straight to the bathroom. They left the bathroom door open, but it didn't matter. The shower was combined with a bathtub and built into the wall, so they could not see what was happening outside the bathroom while they were in it. I got down to business. There were 2 travel suitcases in the room, and I put all their clothes in them. All. There were a few more things hanging on a clothes rack mounted on the wall next to the bathroom door, so I took those as well. I threw all this from the balcony. To make sure I didn't miss anything, I even looked in the bathroom for a forgotten bra, panties, shorts, or t-shirt. There was nothing. I even crawled on my stomach into the bathroom and took all the towels and washcloths I could get my hands on. I even took the bath mat. I could hear them talking in the shower, but I couldn't make out what they were talking about. I knew they couldn't see me because the shower curtain blocked the view. I threw all this from the balcony, including the bed linen. Then I went downstairs and loaded it all into my truck. The people in the room directly below Laura were watching me. I looked at them, put my finger to my lips, and made a motion as if I was locking my mouth and throwing away the key, which meant that they would not say anything. The man put his thumb and forefinger to his lips, then made a motion as if throwing away a key, which meant they wouldn't say anything either. Probably one or both of them were cheating on their spouses, so there was no point in talking about anything. I met Zeke and M at the front desk. I gave them the bed linen I had taken. The brothers looked at each other and started laughing. M has already started printing copies of the photos Zeke took. We knew we didn't have much time, even if Laura and Hendrix had a quick shower in the shower. M had just started printing my photos when the front desk phone rang. He saw what number the call came from and winked at us. Reception desk. Pause. Is it true? Pause. Are you saying the ladder is still there? Pause. Well, stay put. I'll send you extra towels and bedding. I can't do anything about your clothes or personal items, but I'll call the police. They'll be here soon. Pause. No police? But I have to, because someone stole your clothes. Pause. Well, if you insist, I won't call them, but all I can offer is a few towels. Pause. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, and other than this small incident, I hope you enjoy your stay. He hung up the phone, and all 3 of us started laughing. Stay where you are. That's the funniest thing I've heard in years, I said. While we were still laughing, I asked them if I could take them the new towels and sheets myself. This caused another burst of laughter. If you really want to, he said. He left and returned with a pack of clean laundry. I took it and went upstairs, knocked on their door. Room service, I called out. The door opened only a crack. I'll take them, Hendrix said. I ignored him and pushed him aside, despite his muscles. Laura stood there, trying to cover herself. She was still dripping water. None of them recognized me until I threw the towels to Laura. She looked at me, screamed, and grabbed one of the new sheets to cover herself. I laughed. I saw everything, Laura. There's no point in hiding. Your pecs don't seem to have gotten any bigger. Maybe your trainer needs to pay them more attention. Meanwhile, Hendrix stood naked in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do. His upper body was certainly impressive, but the rest was not. When I saw him, I started laughing again. Don't try, Laura. It doesn't matter. I'll stay in town long enough to file for divorce. Good luck in Wisconsin. Jacob, please. I didn't close the door when I left. Hendrix didn't move the entire time I was in the room. She tried to call me and left messages. She had my number as well as his, so she called from the motel phone. In her messages, she said that I left her and that she needed his support, first for training and then for emotional support after I left. I decided to stay in town long enough to begin divorce proceedings. It took 2 days. While going through the clothes I took from their room, I found Hendrix's wallet, keys, phone, and many other things, including a small black notebook. It contained many addresses, names, phone numbers, and ratings of sexual partners. Laura was rated 6 out of 10. M told me later that a couple of hours after I left, someone brought them some things, probably clothes. When they checked out the next morning, they were both wearing ill-fitting tracksuits. Apparently, the man brought a spare key to Hendrix's car. On the morning of the day I started driving back to Leadville, I stopped by Hendrix's house. His wife was at home. I gave her his clothes and other personal items, along with copies of the photographs Zeke and I had taken. Zeke's photos were of them entering a motel holding hands. In mine, they undress. There weren't any explicit sexy shots, but it didn't take much imagination to figure out what was going on. She was especially interested in the little black book. At the last moment, I gave her Laura's things too. Maybe you should call her and ask if she wants to pick up her things, I said, laughing. It had been about 2 hours since I left the Hendricks house, and I was driving down the highway toward Leadville when my phone rang. Hello? Jacob, I'm sorry, but you left me. Let's meet and talk about it. Oh yeah, and grab my bikes when you get there. She really missed her bikes. That was her problem because I had already sold them in Leadville. Fuck you, I replied and hung up. My immediate boss, who was also the plant manager, was throwing a Christmas party and everyone in the plant was invited. I knew the difference between gin and bourbon, so I volunteered to be a bartender. The party was at his house, and the bar was better stocked than some real bars I've seen. It was about 8 in the evening, and the party was in full swing. I only took one break to go to the toilet, but I had as much fun as the other guests. One of the guests brought me a plate of food and placed it on the bar. You need to take a break and get something to eat, she said. She came up to the bar a couple of times during the evening, and we chatted a bit. Thank you, I said. She sat down on one of the chairs at the small bar. The remaining 40 or so guests were scattered throughout the huge basement. Many of them sat around the fireplace, laughing and telling jokes, while the rest danced. The woman who brought me food and I were the only ones who did nothing. Well, actually, we were doing something. I was eating, and she was watching me. My name is Diane, by the way. Diane Webster, she said. I've been watching you, and I see that it doesn't bother you that you miss the main part of the party. I dried my hands with a towel and extended my right hand for a handshake. Jacob Wagner, I said, and I bet I'm having more fun than most of these people. You never know what people might tell their bartender. I laughed when I said this. She laughed too. I understand you work in a factory, she said. Yes, and you? No, I'm an accountant, but I'm also a neighbor, so I get invited to all their parties. Do they often have parties? Not very often. 3 or 4 times a year, but they always go well. And sometimes they get quite stormy. Is this party like that too? No, they get it on at Christmas, but their 4th of July parties are huge. I haven't worked with him long, but he seems like a nice person, I said. Oh yes, he and Amber are wonderful people, and I adore them. I hadn't finished my plate of food yet, and one of the guests wanted to order drinks for his group, and Diane served him herself. Thank you, I said. You know how to work a bar. She laughed. I've opened bottles more than once. Our hosts, Jonathan and Amber Whitmore, were amazing. I loved working with him and for him. He had a deep understanding of the plant where we made cement, the mine where we blasted, the quarry where we got most of our stone, and the transportation system, which included both railroads and trucks. I was lucky that he took me under his wing immediately after our first meeting. I was essentially his assistant and enjoyed the role. Shortly after I finished eating, another guest took over as bartender. Take a break and dance with this beautiful lady, he said, pointing at Diane. I handed him my towel, walked out from behind the bar and bowed to Diane, who curtsied back. We both laughed and went to the small dance floor. Our bodies immediately moved closer to each other and remained close for 3 songs. After the 3rd song, we stopped and looked at each other. In the interest of complete candor, I should tell you that I am married, I said, and she took a step back. Is she here today? No, it's a long story, but I can tell it quickly. Fine, I'd like to hear it, she said. We both took a glass, and she led me upstairs to the office. She sat down on the sofa and invited me to sit next to her. Okay, tell me about this marriage. I told you. When I got to the part about stealing their clothes, she almost fell to the floor laughing. When she finally calmed down, she asked, "So when is the divorce going to happen?" I just filed after Thanksgiving, so it will take a few months. I took a sip of my drink. What's your story? About the same as yours, only my husband didn't need a coach for his athletic achievements. He already knew how to do it and practiced regularly with waitresses in local bars. I never caught him in the act, but this is a small town and someone reported him. This happened a little over a year ago. How do you feel about life after divorce? I asked. It's still new. We got divorced just 5 months ago. The problem is that a lot of idiots think that because I'm divorced, that means I'm easily available. I laughed. I got the impression that she was not worth getting involved with. We sat and talked until Amber Whitmore told us it was time to leave. I walked her to her house next door, and we shook hands goodbye. 2 days later, I walked into my boss's office and directly asked him for Diane's phone number. I can't give it to you without her permission, but I can give her your number and she can decide what to do with it, if that's okay with you. This suited me. She called 3 days later. We talked for a long time, and in the end, she gave me her number. After that, we often talked on the phone. Our first date was 2 days before Christmas. We had dinner, danced a little, and I walked her home. She was going to spend Christmas with family, and I am in my apartment. My doorbell rang around 5:30 p.m. on Christmas Day. It was Diane. "Would you like some company?" she asked. "I really want to," I replied, and she came in carrying a small basket. She placed it on the table and began to lay out the food: turkey, ham, potatoes, and everything else that is usually served for Christmas dinner. "I told your parents that you were probably alone and starving, so my mom put this kit together for you. Tell her my gratitude. It looks amazing." She prepared plates for both of us, and we sat down to dinner, talking the whole time. After dinner, we cleaned everything up together. Later, we sat on my couch with egg liqueur and were still talking. I learned that her husband worked at the best hardware store in town. When she said his name, I recognized him. I used to chat with him when I went into this store. I liked him. They were married for 3 years before they divorced. I told her that he seemed like a nice person. "Oh, he is a good man. We're still friends, but he cheats and I can't stand cheaters. Can I ask you a personal question? If it's none of my business, tell me." I took a break. "Your ex-husband works at a hardware store and you are an accountant. How can you afford to live near the Whitmores?" She grinned. "Thanks to my parents, or rather my grandparents. They owned the land on which the area was built. My house was the first one built and was used as a model for the others. When all the plots were sold and all the houses were built, they gave it to me." "Great-grandparents. Where do they live?" "They have a small ranch in Texas, in the hills. Now they are at my parents' house for Christmas. By the way, I just returned from there." It was already past midnight when she decided to leave. I walked her to the car and discovered that about 10 centimeters of new snow had fallen outside. I wasn't used to so much snow and was worried about how she would get home. Of course, she had driven in such conditions all her life, while for me this was the first winter when I had to deal with such snow. "It's no big deal," she said as we cleared most of the snow off her car. "The harvesting equipment won't even come out until about 15 centimeters have fallen. I'll be fine." She put her hand on my shoulder, pulled me closer, and kissed me. Merry Christmas, and I'll call you when I get home if you want. I want to, I said and kissed her back. This was, in fact, our second date and first kiss. Our third date was New Year's Eve, and we went to her parents' party. She introduced me to her parents, brother, sister, and their spouses. The party was busy, and we didn't have much time to socialize, so I grabbed a drink and went socializing. Her grandparents had already moved back to Texas, but there were about 50 people at the party, including my boss and his wife. "Well, Jacob," he said, "you must be doing something right. It's a great honor to be invited to this party." "I think so too, Mr. Whitmore." "Call me Jonathan when we're not at the plant," he said. His wife spoke. "And call me Amber any time you see me." I didn't see much of Diane during the party. She was busy helping her parents, and every time I tried to help, I was told to enjoy the party. I totally did, thanks to the Whitmores. They introduced me to several couples who turned out to be important figures in society. One young lady became attached to me and took it upon herself to ensure that I always had food and drink. She introduced herself as Rosita Cameron. After an hour of communicating with her, I already wanted to get rid of her, and I began to look for a way to get away from her tenacious embrace. I tried to stay close to the Whitmores and others, but Rosie, as she asked to be called, would not let me go. I managed to hide from her for a while I went to the toilet, but apparently she was waiting for me outside, because she immediately grabbed my hand as soon as I came out. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore and told her I was leaving. I started looking for Diane, but couldn't find her, so I walked up to her mother, thanked her, and said goodbye. I took my coat and went out. The sausage was cooking, and I was on my second cup of coffee the next morning when my phone rang. I saw who called and answered. "Happy New Year. How was the party?" "She was great until Mom told me you left. Then I got upset and the party started to suck. Why did you leave and not tell me?" "The main reason is a young lady named Rosita. She clung to me and wouldn't let go, and every time I saw you, you were busy pouring drinks or serving snacks or acting like the perfect hostess. I looked for you when I left, but I didn't find you, and Rosita still held my hand tightly. I decided to leave just to get rid of her." I felt her mood improve a little. "My God, she's a good friend of mine, and I asked her to make sure that no other woman gets too close to you. She definitely did her job. Nobody could come near me. But I didn't want her to scare you off." "Anyway, Happy New Year," I said. "Happy New Year to you too, but it would be better if you stayed." "I'm making breakfast if you want to join," I offered. "I would love to, but I need to watch the Rose Parade with my family." We chatted a bit and set up dinner for 3 days in advance. The day before our meeting, I called to make sure she could still come. "I'm sorry, Jacob, but something happened." She did not offer to reschedule the meeting. That evening, I was driving home and remembered that I needed to buy epoxy resin to fix the lamp I broke, so I stopped at the hardware store. My old friend, David Webster, Diana's ex-husband, was talking to another buyer. "Yes, she is coming back to me. 2 or 3 more dates, and we'll be together again. I was stupid the first time, and she didn't deserve me to cheat on her. But I learned my lesson. After dinner tomorrow, I'll better understand what and how. We'll see." "Good luck. Let me know how it turns out." "Absolutely," said David. He turned and saw me. "Hi, Jacob. How can I help?" "I need epoxy. Small. Not this giant economy package. I haven't used it that much even in 10 years. He laughed. "I don't understand why we even sell big cans. We almost never sell them." We went to the checkout, and he punched my item. I handed him a 20. I couldn't keep my mouth shut. "I heard you talking about dinner tomorrow. Are you trying to get back together with your ex-girlfriend?" "Hell no. I'm trying to get back to my ex-wife. I screwed up the first time, and I'm trying to make it right. Tomorrow is my birthday, and I convinced her to have dinner with me. She always gave me special gifts on my birthday, if you know what I mean." He laughed. I didn't understand. "What does she think about coming back?" "Not sure. We're quite friendly, and sometimes we go out to dinner or just spend the evening together, if you know what I mean. This was the second time he had used the expression, if you know what I mean, and the hint was obvious. Yes, I think I understand. I took my change and epoxy and went home. 2 days after her birthday dinner with her ex-husband, she called me. "How are you?" she asked. "Not bad. And you?" "Overall, good," she said. "So your dinner with David went well, huh?" "Yes. Wait. How did you know about him, and how did you know it was him?" "Who cares? What matters is that you get back together. He seems to think so. In fact, he thinks that just a couple more pleasant evenings with you, and everything will work out. How about it, Diana? A couple more pleasant evenings, and everything will work out. And what constitutes a pleasant evening for you? Dinner? Dancing? Binge? A nice slow roll in bed to give him a nice birthday present? I heard that you always gave him nice birthday gifts. I also heard that sex with your ex-husband should be pretty good." "Jacob, that's not true." "And how exactly?" "We're just talking." "Yes, pillow talk is always enjoyable." There was a long pause before I heard, "Goodbye, Jacob." I looked at the dead phone in my hand and said quietly to no one, "Goodbye, Diana." The next 2 weeks at work became my salvation. Our equipment was broken, we were behind in production, and we were short of workers. All in all, it was a damn lousy 2 weeks, but it kept me busy like a cat burying its poop, so time flew by. It was the last working day of the month, and Jonathan and I usually try to have lunch together. We took our seats, ordered, and drank coffee. "What's going on between you and Diana?" he asked. "She's in constant contact with Amber, and we were under the impression that things were going pretty well between you and her. And then Amber told me that you accused Diana of sleeping with David. Of course, you don't have to tell me about your personal life, but—" I took a sip of coffee. "Well, you see, the thing is this." I told him everything. "So you didn't directly accuse her of sleeping with him, you just implied it." "Right, just like Webster hinted to me. The problem is that she didn't deny it. It's a pity. He broke her heart once, and he will do it again. She's a grown woman. He can handle it," I told him. "I hope so," Jonathan said. The rest of our lunch was spent working. He wanted me to go to Atlanta in a couple of weeks and try to convince our headquarters to give us 2 extra trucks for the quarry. This would be my first trip to our headquarters, and I was excited about it. Denver is known as a mile-high city, but Leadville is almost 2 miles above sea level, and I'd love to get off that icy mountain for a few days. I was driving to the Denver airport to catch a flight to Atlanta. It's been a month since I spoke with Diana, and I also changed hardware stores. I didn't fly often. In fact, this flight to Atlanta was only my 4th. I've heard that taking off or landing in Denver during the day can result in some pretty bumpy flights. That day was no exception. We shook for the longest 10 minutes of my life immediately after takeoff. Then I, along with others, was very happy when this huge plane leveled out and flew calmly to Atlanta. We got 2 extra trucks, but I don't think that was due to my pleas. They just saw that they couldn't argue with the numbers I presented. I think they just wanted to see me beg. Jonathan recommended that I visit my parents on the way back, so I made a quick detour and stopped by. I missed the warm weather in the American Deep South, especially in February. It was freezing cold in Leadville, but in my hometown, it was 20 degrees Celsius and sunny. My parents met me at the airport, and after hugs and kisses, they took me to their home. We sat down to discuss the latest news, with the exception of Laura, who we seemed to be deliberately avoiding talking about. My lawyer only called me once about the divorce. The only thing Laura asked for were her 2 bicycles, which I have already sold. I decided that I would call him the next day and find out how things were. After dinner, I called my friend Zeke. We met at one of our favorite places and ordered drinks. As it turns out, Laura and Hendrix apparently moved into the old trailer together. The only money they had was what he earned as a trainer. She still wasn't doing anything other than training, but at least she was getting it for free. They posted flyers all over town asking for sponsors to help her get to Wisconsin in April for her Ironman. They even went on local TV twice, begging for money. But Zeke, M, and a few of my other friends made it clear that she was married, cheated on her husband, and was living with a coach while still married to me. Hendrix's wife joined them in denouncing the couple, even going on television to reveal how she obtained their property from the motel. She didn't call it the name of the one who gave them their things. Motel M also got involved, and unauthorized advertising led to an increase in customer traffic. As a result, Laura had only one sponsor, the gym where she trained. She received very few donations, and they were all small, or so I was told. Of course, no one except Laura and Hendrix knew for sure. There was also a rumor that she got pregnant, but had an abortion because she didn't want anything to interfere with her training. But it was just a rumor as far as anyone knew. The next day I called my lawyer, and he told me basically the same thing I heard the night before. He also said that our trial would probably take place in April and asked if I would be there. Probably not, I told him. It's okay. I can handle it, he said. The next morning I flew to Denver. Morning flights to or from Denver are, according to some seasoned travelers, much better than afternoon flights. The weather was perfect that morning, no turbulence. I picked up my truck and drove home. The weather was clear and sunny, but when I arrived it was so cold that it could only be compared to a witch's chest. It was already too late to go to the office, so I headed home. More precisely, I stopped at the best restaurant in the city. I intended to have dinner, but when I went inside and looked around for an empty seat, I saw Diana sitting with some man. He sat with his back to me, so I couldn't see his face. I assumed it was David. We locked eyes for a moment before I turned and walked away. In my apartment, I microwaved a meatloaf dinner and opened a beer. As I was going to bed, I heard the wind howling. The wind in the mountains can be something special. Speeds of 110 kilometers per h passing through the peaks were common, and any snow on the ground was scattered everywhere. My last thought before going to bed was how nice it would be to have someone nearby to cuddle with. My apartment was warm and cozy when I got up the next morning. Of course, all the windows outside were covered with ice. I just hoped that I wouldn't have to go to the quarry that day. Later that day, I stopped by Jonathan's office and told him about my trip. He congratulated me on receiving 2 trucks. To be honest, I never thought we would get them, he said. You must have made an impression on someone. Great job. Thank you. Returning to my office, I took care of the tasks that had accumulated in my absence. That evening, I returned to the cafe. Diana or no Diana, I wanted a good meal, and their coffee was the best I've ever tasted. I ordered and wrapped my hands around my cup of coffee to keep warm. Can I sit down? She asked. Without looking up, I asked, are there no more seats available? There is not one that I would like. Fine. If this place is so special, it's all yours. When she took off her coat, I took my cup of coffee and coat and moved to the other side of the restaurant. When I sat down, I looked up and she was already leaving. Apparently, this place wasn't that special. After that, coffee and food were no longer enjoyable. Sit down, Jacob, Jonathan said. I sat down. I found myself between a rock and a hard place. Pause. Next week, the company president, 2 senior vice presidents, and their wives will come here. They want to stop here before heading to Vail to ski. Of course, I want to throw a party for them, but I have a problem. As my assistant, you should be invited. As a good friend of my wife, Diana should be invited. He looked at me before continuing. It would be better if you came with a couple. It would also be nice if Diana had a couple. Another pause. Are you starting to see where I'm going with this? Yes, sir, I understand. Let me try to help you. Invite Diana, and she might come with her ex. I heard that they are going to get back together, if they haven't already. And I will go to the quarry and start repairing one of the Cat 789s, which by then will urgently need to be repaired. I'll take care of it. Will this solve your problem? He just looked at me, smiled, and shook his head. Since you've been here, You've impressed me with how quickly you pick things up on the fly. You always have good, reasonable solutions when I give you a problem or challenge, and you get along with everyone. This is the first time you've made me think you're dumber than a truck full of our rocks about some things. The party will be at my house next Friday night. Wear a suit and tie and bring a date. Now get back to work. Wear a suit and tie and bring a date. That's what he said, and he meant it. There were no problems with the suit and tie, but with a couple. There were only 10 days left before the party, so it was almost impossible to find a date. I only knew a few women in town, and none of them were close enough to ask me out on a date, especially to a Whitmore party. Plus, I had absolutely no idea which of them were single or even available. Jonathan said he was in a quandary. Well, it seemed like he wasn't the only one. The days passed too quickly for me, and I had no idea what to do with the couple. It was Saturday afternoon, and I was in my apartment. I opened the refrigerator door to take out the bag of chili I had pulled out of the freezer earlier to defrost. I love chili, and I love cooking it. I look through cookbooks and find recipes online. My last batch was especially good. I took the bag and beer from the refrigerator and noticed that the light was not on and the motor was not working. I closed and opened the door several times. Nothing. I went to the electrical panel and the refrigerator breaker was off. I turned it back on, but it turned off again. I tried again with the same result. The beer and chili went back into the refrigerator. I put on my coat and headed to the hardware store. There were 2 of them in the city. I stopped going to the one where David Webster worked, but this time I had to go there because the other store was closed. I've never seen it closed on a Saturday afternoon, but it was closed that Saturday. Taking a deep breath, I walked into Webster's store. I knew what I needed, went to where it was, grabbed one, and headed to the cash register, hoping someone other than Webster would be there. There he was, talking to a man I recognized as Diana's father. I met him at a party at his house, but we didn't spend much time together. I recognized him mainly by his curled mustache. Besides his family, it was his pride and joy. He sang in a barbershop quartet, and all 4 singers had such a mustache. I met them all at his party. I listened to their conversation. I thought everything was settled, but she stopped talking to me, Webster said. She did the right thing, said her father. You don't deserve a second chance. You ruined everything once, and none of us, especially Diana, think you would have acted differently if she would give you another chance. But who is this guy she's dating? No one seems to know him, and no one has seen them together. Is he from Leadville? It's none of your business, David. Just leave her alone. All this time, while they were talking, they were completing the purchase. After he said, just leave her alone, Diana's father took his purchase and change and walked out without looking back. Webster looked up, saw me, and smiled. Long time no see. How are you? Not bad, I said. It seems like every time I come here you talk about your personal life. Do you ever talk about anything else? He laughed. It's a small town. There's nothing more to talk about. So how is your personal life? I asked. The last time you tried to get your ex-wife back. Not very good. It seems that she met some guy and he completely charmed her. The fact is that no one knows who he is and no one has seen him. I remembered seeing her in a cafe with a man. Maybe he's not from the city, I said. He has to be, Webster said. I completed my purchase, went home, replaced the circuit breaker, and was delighted to hear my refrigerator humming. I heated up the chili, drank 2 beers, and stared blankly at the snow falling outside the window, wondering who Diana's new boyfriend was. It's not like she and I had a long relationship. We only met a few times, but I liked her. The next day was Sunday, and I was doing laundry. There were only 4 apartments in my building, and there was no laundry room. Every Sunday, I took my laundry to the laundromat on the main street of the city, sat there and washed, dried, and folded the clothes. It was always empty when I visited, and I wondered how the place survived economically. One of the benefits of going there on Sundays was that I never had any problems with parking. The street was always deserted until midday, when church services ended and people went to the best restaurant in the city, which was located next to the laundry room. It was not yet noon, and my truck, as usual on a Sunday morning, stood out because there were no other cars around. I was reading the news on my phone when I heard the door open. I looked up, and there she stood. I returned to my phone. I heard her footsteps getting closer, so I looked up again. She sat down on the cheap plastic chair next to me. We looked at each other for a few seconds before she spoke. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to leave my laundry. At least that's what I told myself, although it was ridiculous. I think we could help each other, she began. How? I asked. Jonathan and Amber are having a party on Friday. I know we were both invited, and I also know they would like us both to be couples. Why don't we forget our differences for a few days and go together? I thought for a few seconds. What about David? What's wrong with him? I thought you were getting back together. Won't he be jealous? Honestly, he's not the kind of person you'd go to a party like that with, if you know what I mean. I listened to her, and suddenly I wanted to support David. What do you mean? The man was your husband for how long? 3 years? I'm sure you went everywhere with him. He lived in the house where you live and attended the Whitmore's parties more than once. What if he's not good enough? It's quite sad. I understand that he cheated on you, but the guy is trying to get you back. Maybe this party is his chance to show you that he has changed. Let me get this straight. Do you think I should go with David? I don't know, but I don't think you'll come with me. She just looked at me, got up and left. What an idiot, I thought. The lady has taken steps towards talking to you, and you, with your stupid stubbornness, continue to push her away. It's pretty stupid. I jumped up and followed her. Diana, wait. She was already holding the door handle and was about to go out, but stopped. I approached her. Well, she said. I, uh... Come on, Jacob. Speak, but it must be something worthwhile. I started. I don't know what your relationship with David is, so if I'm crossing the line, I'm sure you'll tell me, but here's the thing. I took a deep breath. Laura cheated on me. David cheated on you. I have no intentions of getting back together with Laura, and she seems quite happy with her coach, but David seems eager to get back together with you. By the way, I can understand this because after just a few dates with you, I realized that I like you more and more. Then you and I agreed to go on a date, and you canceled it, saying that something happened. I accepted it. Then I found out that you were dating your ex-husband, and I remember you saying that you were good friends. I spoke to him, and he voluntarily told me that he was trying to make peace with you, and that you had spent several very pleasant evenings together. He hinted, but never outright said, that these evenings included sex, especially on his birthday. Then yesterday I heard him and your dad talking about your new boyfriend out of town. Your father told him to stay away from you. I spoke to David after your father left, and I was of the opinion that he was not going to give up on trying to get you back, despite what your father said. So here I am, stuck between your ex-husband, your new boyfriend, and the guy I saw with you at the restaurant. Not knowing what to do, you suggest we go to a party together. I was hoping that you and I would get something serious, but I don't want to share, and I only compete when I know the rules of the game. But it seems there are no rules with you, so I won't play. So here I am, not knowing what to do. By then we had returned to the cheap plastic chairs and sat down again. She took my hands in hers. Did you really mean it when you said you liked me more and more? She asked. Yes. And if there was no ex-husband and a new guy out of town, would you go to the party with me? With pleasure. What time will you pick me up? Or should I meet you there? What do you mean? I mean, I have no intention of getting back together with David. 3 meetings after the divorce were related to the divorce itself. He tried to persuade me to give up alimony, but I will not give in. I don't need his money, but damn it, he'll keep paying it until I get married again, if at all. I canceled my date with you because I wanted to convince him that it was over between us. And I can assure you that nothing sexual has happened between us since we got divorced, no matter what he implied. To be honest, I completely forgot that our last meeting was on his birthday, and I thought that you and I would have many evenings together. The man you saw with me in the restaurant was my father. We have dinner together at least once a month. And as for my couplism, not from the city, it's you. Or you are. Or whatever the English language defines it. Any questions? Only about 3 dozen. You can start asking them at dinner tonight. For now, your laundry is dry and ready to fold. Is 6:30 okay at my house? This will be perfect, I said, feeling dizzy. Fine. See you then. She kissed me, took 2 steps, came back and kissed me again. This time, the kiss lasted longer. I really like kissing you, she said as she walked away. I watched her leave and was amazed at the changes that had taken place. I was also surprised at my stupidity. Why didn't I talk to her a month ago? Men are such fools sometimes. Dinner that night wasn't all that memorable, at least the food. Everything else was unforgettable and almost perfect. It would have been ideal if it had ended in rough sex, but that didn't happen. However, it all ended with very pleasant kisses. On Thursday, Jonathan asked me if I had a date for the party. I assured him that there was. That's good because I understand Diana has a date too, but I expect you both to behave yourself. Okay? I think everything will be fine, I said with a smile. I parked in her driveway Friday night. On the street in front of Jonathan and Amber's house, there were 2 limousines and many other cars. I rang Diana's doorbell and smiled when she opened it. She invited me in while she took the shawl. She was wearing that little black dress that every woman on earth has, and in which she looks amazing. Wow, was all I could say when I saw her. She smiled. When Jonathan opened the door for us, his eyes widened. Are you together? At that moment, Diana leaned over and kissed me. He looked at both of us. I'll take that as a yes, he said with a smile. I was pleased when he introduced me as his assistant to the 3 bosses and their wives. The president even commented that I persuaded them to give us 2 new trucks. Yes, sir, I said, but did you see the numbers after? He smiled and confirmed what he had seen. It was a long, pleasant evening. The guests of honor left in their limousines by midnight. Diana and I were the last ones left at 2 in the morning. Finally, Amber admitted to Jonathan that she knew Diana and I would come together. She just wanted to see how nervous he would be. All 4 of us laughed about it. I walked Diana home. It was late, so we just kissed goodbye at her door. She made no move to invite me inside. My lawyer called and informed me that my divorce hearing with Laura was scheduled for April 7th. He asked if I would attend. Last time he asked, I told him probably not. This time I said yes. My relationship with Diana got better and better, but there was still no sex. I didn't take any steps in this direction, and neither did she. The day of the trial arrived, and I sat with my lawyer. Laura didn't show up, but her lawyer was there. Where is she? Asked the judge. In Wisconsin, her lawyer replied. Why isn't she here? She's doing an Ironman. What is this? Her lawyer explained. She considered this more important than today's meeting. I cannot answer that question, Your Honor. I think I can, the judge said. Before I knew it, I was divorced. Laura received nothing except the money I left for her. My lawyer shook my hand and told me that in a few weeks I would be officially single. I spent a few days with my family, during which time we heard on the local news that local resident Laura Wagner had been disqualified after finishing the swim leg of the Ironman event in Wisconsin when she got into an argument with one of the judges over an equipment mix-up. Ms. Wagner, who finished winning 297th out of 1,300 competitors, dropped her towel in the swim-to-bike transition area. Her coach, Jason Hendricks, himself a former Ironman, picked it up and handed it to her. The unknown judge immediately disqualified Miss Wagner, citing the rule that no assistance or support could be given to participants. Mrs. Wagner became so upset that she blamed Mr. Hendricks and attacked him. She was immediately arrested and detained in Wisconsin awaiting trial. Mr. Hendricks left immediately, promising to return for Miss Wagner's trial. Miss Wagner's bicycle was examined, and it was found that its gears were damaged. Miss Wagner also blamed Mr. Hendricks, who was banned for life from participating in any sanctioned activities. Additionally, his Ironman training license was revoked. I laughed until I dropped. Almost 2 years of training, a divorce, an affair, rumors of an abortion, and she finished 297th out of 1,300 in the first stage. Bicycles were of no use to her. There were snowstorms on the roads in Leadville when I drove there from the Denver airport. I talked to Diana while I was away, so she knew about the divorce and Laura's disqualification. I pulled up to my house, grabbed my bag, and headed inside. I had just reached the door of my building when someone jumped on me. It was Diana. After 2 or 3 dozen kisses, she dragged me to my door and helped me open it. Then we both stumbled into my living room and she started undressing me. I thought she was just helping me take off my winter clothes, but she continued. Hey, 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 wait a minute. Let me catch my breath, I said. No way, mister, she said. You're divorced now, and I'm going to have you until I lose my breath. I stopped her and hugged her tightly so she couldn't move. I'm looking forward to getting to this part, but what does having you until you lose your breath mean? She laughed. I have no idea. It just came out like that. I guess this means that now that you're single, I can fuck your brains out as much as I want. Now it's clear, I said, helping her take off my clothes. Then we started to dress her. We didn't stay in our clothes for long. Soon we were both naked and on my bed. No affection or romance. There was only the desperation of two people who had not had sex for a long time, and who desperately wanted to change their celibate state as soon as possible. The next day we both had to go to work, and we barely made it. She was willing to stay the night, and when we left for work, we were still getting dressed. We spent a good part of the day talking on the phone to each other. She had a meeting that she couldn't miss, otherwise we would have met at my apartment and had an afternoon date, but we couldn't do it. But we did it in the evening. And how it happened. I gave her the key to my apartment, and she was waiting for me when I arrived. She was already undressed and had just gotten out of the shower. I've never showered faster in my life. After that, I jumped into an already warm bed with an incredibly warm body that was already there. Our lovemaking was different that evening and night. We took our time and explored each other. I studied every inch of her body from the outside and some of the inside. I learned how to make her smile and moan at the same time. And then I learned how to make her scream and laugh at the same time. In the 5th century BC, the Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu wrote a book called The Art of War, in which he outlined aspects of warfare. After a week with Diana, my idea of love and how to be loved changed, and I began to mentally plan a better book about love called The Art of Love, dedicated to her. The physical side, of course, was there. I loved looking at her, touching her, tasting her, and feeling her close. This was new to me, but somehow I always knew when she was around. My parents told me that our dog, Baron, always knew when I was approaching the house. He would sit by the window so he could see me, and his tail would begin to wag as I approached, after which he would run from door to door, trying to guess which one I would enter. I felt the same way about Diana. I felt when she was near, and my heart began to beat faster, and a smile appeared on my face. Sex itself, of course, can be described, but the sensations cannot. We got married a year after our first lovemaking. It was a beautiful, clear, warm mountain day, not at all like the same day a year ago. The weather in the mountains took some getting used to. My family came to the wedding. Shortly before the ceremony, my father took me aside and asked if I was interested in what happened to Laura. Not really, but I think you're going to tell me anyway, I told him. Well, you know what happened in Wisconsin, don't you? That she attacked him? Yes, I knew about it. She was jailed for 6 months for this. After she got out, she came back to town, and no one wanted anything to do with her, not even Hendricks. He worked in the same gym where they trained, but as a regular trainer. He could no longer advertise himself as an Ironman coach. She returned to her old job because she is really good with computers. In general, she lost all interest in training, except for the annual hot dog eating contest on the 4th of July. Lord, son, she must have gained 25 kilograms. I laughed. The world was back in its right orbit, and I was about to marry the love of my life. Diana and I, of course, saw her ex around the city, but never spoke to him. We had been married almost a year when I had to go to the hardware store. By that time, we had one of those large chain stores that are all over the country. Naturally, he sold the goods cheaper than our two local stores, and they were forced to close. So I needed to buy new belts for my belt sander, so I went to this store. I was choosing the right straps when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around, and it was Diana's ex-husband, David Webster. "Hello, stranger," he said. "Hi," I replied. "How are you?" "Not bad." He was wearing a vest with the store's logo. "Do you work here now?" I asked. "Yes, this is the only job in town. The pay is good and the benefits are great." "Okay," I said. "Well, I have everything I need, so I'll go." He touched my hand and stopped me. "I want you to know that you did me a favor." "Is it true?" "Which?" "I don't have to pay child support anymore." I replied that it was no problem and thought to myself as I walked away, "Yeah, but now I get birthday presents." Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.